My name is Alan Rosen. I'm 68 years old, and I want to start this by saying something I've thought about saying for a while now. Something I almost didn't say, because there's a version of me that would rather present things cleanly. That version is still around. He's just less in charge than he used to be. I spent 30 years building something, a real thing, something that started with nothing. With less than nothing, actually, because at 31 years old, I had debt I couldn't see the bottom of, a wife who had every reason to leave and didn't, and the specific kind of humiliation that comes from being a man who is certain he knows things and has nothing to show for it. I've been broke, real broke. I want you to hold that because it matters later. 30 years of calls, flights, handshakes, decisions made in rooms that most people don't get into. We moved things, connected people who needed things with people who had things. If you needed a lawyer to understand what I did, I'd already lost. The business grew the way things grow when you're willing to do what most people aren't. Not for a year, but for a decade, and then another decade. I built it carefully, the right structure, the right people in the right seats. I set it up, intentionally, methodically, and it took longer than I expected, so that it would run without me. That was the whole point. Build something real enough that it doesn't need you standing over it. And then around 64, I walked away. I had planned this retirement. I had the financial picture where it needed to be. We're comfortable, I'll say that, and I'll say it once, because I'm not going to sit here and be coy about it while also asking you to trust me. We don't think about the grocery bill. There are people in this world with harder versions of this problem, and I know that. But money doesn't retire. You do. And that's the thing I wasn't prepared for. I had the house in Florida. We have a place up north. Barbara and I had talked about what this would look like. The trips, the time with the grandkids. Eli is 10 now, named partly after my father. And Maya is 7 and argues with everyone in the room. And I genuinely have no idea where she gets that. I was ready. I was certain I was ready. And then, first Monday, nowhere to be, no call scheduled, no one waiting on a decision from me. I called the office just to check in. They were fine, completely, entirely fine, running exactly the way I'd spent years making sure it would run without me. The woman who answered, she's been there 11 years. She said, "Everything's good, Alan," in the tone you use with someone who is no longer the point. Warm, professional, final. I sat there with the phone in my hand for a while. I had money. I had a paid-off life. I had Barbara, 41 years and still the smartest person in any room she walks into. I had grandchildren who knew my name and ran toward me. I had everything I'd said I was building toward. And I sat there with the phone in my hand thinking, okay, now what? That's the question this whole thing is about. Now what? And why nobody told me clearly enough that the question was coming. The fear, the specific fear, because I think naming it exactly is the only way this is useful, was not about money. It wasn't about health. I'm 68. I take care of myself. I'm not going to pretend it's not something I think about, but it wasn't the thing. And it wasn't Barbara. We've been married long enough that we've already survived every version of each other. That's not what this was. Here's what it was. I had confused my identity with my function for so long that when the function stopped, I genuinely didn't know what was underneath it. Not my values, those I know, not my relationships. I know what I feel about the people I love. But the thing that gave my days their shape, their direction, their sense of rightness, the reason to get up at a specific time and move through the day with purpose, that was gone overnight, and I hadn't seen it coming. You wake up on a Tuesday, nothing's on fire. No one needs your read on a situation. No one is waiting for you to decide something. The day just sits there, open, with no natural structure to it. And that feeling, I want to be honest about what that feeling actually is. It's not grief exactly. It's not depression exactly. It's more like walking into a room where all the furniture has been removed, and you know rationally that this is what you asked for, and you still don't know where to stand. I'm not going to give you a 5-step system. I don't have one. I'm not a financial advisor. I'll say that now and mean it. And I'm not a therapist, and I'm not a coach. I'm a man who built something real and walked away from it and spent a confusing, uncomfortable, occasionally clarifying year figuring out what that actually meant. I'm going to tell you what I noticed, what I went through in that first year and a half, what I eventually understood, and what I'm still working on. Because I think some of you are heading toward this, or you're already in it, and the honest version is not the version you're going to get from a brochure or from most conversations. People don't talk about this part. I want to try. There's a flight I think about, a specific one. I've made this trip, a long one, international, probably 100 times over the course of the business, maybe more. Every single other time there was something waiting on the other end, a deal, a person, a meeting that mattered. My entire body had a relationship with that arrival. I could feel the approach from an hour out. The engine of me would start turning over in preparation. This trip was personal. Barbara had arranged it. She arranges things now, and I'm learning to be grateful for that instead of itchy about it. First time in longer than I could honestly remember where nothing was waiting on the other end. No one needed me to land. I was just a man on a plane going somewhere warm with his wife. I sat there for 6 hours. I tried to read. Put down the book after 40 pages, couldn't tell you what happened in them. Watched 20 minutes of a movie. Looked out the window at the Atlantic for a long time. And somewhere in the middle of that flight, not one dramatic moment, more like something settling slowly into place, the thought arrived clearly. This is what it's going to be. Days without direction built in. Days where the arrival has no object. Days I'm going to have to fill from the inside because nothing outside is going to fill them for me. I'd built toward this, deliberately, spent years on it, and I was sitting there realizing I had no idea how to inhabit it. When I landed, I told Barbara. I said something like, I'm paraphrasing, but it's close. I said, I think I don't know what to do when there's nothing to do. And she listened. Barbara listens in a way that makes you feel like your words are being weighed, not just received. And then she said, quiet and without drama, welcome to what I've been doing while you were gone. I filed that sentence away. It took me a long time to understand the full weight of it. Maybe I'm still understanding it. Look, there were a number of things I had to work through, and they came in a particular order because I think they always do when you're paying actual attention, instead of just performing adjustment for the benefit of the people around you. I want to go through them, and I want to give each one its real space, because I think any one of them might be the thing you need to hear. The first thing I had to figure out was that I had spent 30 years confusing my identity with my function. And that confusion, which felt like strength, which felt like commitment, which felt like knowing who you are, turned out to be a dependency I hadn't named. I want to be careful here because I don't think this is a unique problem. I think it's an extremely common one, especially among people who built things. The function was real. The work was real. The results were real. I'm not saying there was something wrong with caring deeply about what I was building, but there's a difference between caring about your work and needing it to tell you who you are. And for most of my adult life, I was doing the second thing and calling it the first. Here's how I know. Because when the work stopped, the answer to who are you became genuinely unclear. Not the factual answer. I knew my name, my family, my history. I mean the functional answer, the one that tells you why you get up at a specific time, what the day is organized around, what you're moving toward. That answer, I didn't have it anymore, and I'd never noticed how much I'd been relying on it. I'll tell you something that doesn't make me look particularly sharp. I'm 68. I've made decisions in high-pressure rooms. I've navigated things that required a certain kind of clarity. I've been broke and I've built myself out of it, and I've done it twice, which I think entitles me to at least the claim of some self-awareness. And it took me 11 months. I counted because I'm the kind of person who tracks things. 11 months to be able to name what was happening to me. 11 months of low-level disorientation before I could call it what it was. I was sitting in this room one evening. Barbara was reading, and I said out loud for the first time, "I think I don't know who I am when I'm not the one running something." I didn't say it dramatically. It came out almost matter of fact, the way a realization does when it's been waiting long enough. And Barbara looked up from her book and she said, again, this is close to verbatim because I've replayed it. She said, "I know. I've been watching you try to figure that out for 10 months. 10 months. She'd seen it before I had. This is consistent with how things go in our marriage. I've made peace with it. What I eventually figured out, and this is the thing worth writing down, is that retiring from work does not automatically make you present for the rest of your life. Those are two separate events. Walking away from the function removes the function. It does not install anything in its place. Presence is a choice. It's a skill. And I had not practiced it. I was just not at work. That's a different thing from being somewhere. The second thing I noticed was about time. And I'll be honest, this one surprised me more than the identity piece, because I thought I'd thought about it. For 30 years, I didn't have enough of it. I chose deals over dinners. I wasn't at things I should have been at. I don't say that with excessive guilt. Guilt about the past has a very limited return on investment, but I say it factually. I made choices. The business was on one side of those choices, and time with Barbara and the kids was often on the other. I knew it while it was happening. I told myself there would be time later. And then later arrived, and I had time. More time in a single week than I'd had in a month during the years when things were really moving. And I genuinely believed, that all this deferred presence was just going to activate, that wanting something for 30 years was sufficient preparation for having it. It isn't. That's not how any of this works. What happened instead was that I had this enormous expanse of unstructured time and no framework for inhabiting it. My entire adult life had been built around a structure that generated its own urgency. The next call, the next flight, the next decision. The structure told me what the day was for. Remove the structure, remove the urgency, and what you're left with is time sitting there in front of you, waiting for you to decide what it means. I spent 4 months like that. I want to be precise, not suffering. I'm not describing hardship. We were on the boat. We were having dinners. I was present for the grandkids in ways I hadn't been before. Good things were happening. But underneath all of it was this low-frequency feeling that I couldn't locate, like a sound you can't quite hear but know is there. The feeling that the days didn't have enough weight to them, that I was moving through them without traction. I don't fully understand why it took so long to get my footing. Part of it, I think, is that I had never in my adult life learned to be still. Movement was the medium. The next thing, the next phase, the next level of the build. The direction was always present. When the direction disappeared, I didn't have the muscle for stillness. Nobody had ever asked me to develop it, and I'd never asked myself to. Barbara said something in that period that I've turned over a lot. She said, "You spent 30 years becoming very good at one specific mode of being, and now you're standing here expecting to be immediately good at a completely different one, as if the skills transfer automatically." And then she went back to what she was doing because Barbara doesn't belabor things. She says them once, clearly, and then trusts you to do something with them. She was right. The skills don't transfer automatically. You have to build the new ones. And building them felt, initially, like starting over, which is something I've done before, and which I know how to do, and which I still didn't particularly enjoy. The third thing involves Barbara directly. And I'm going to be careful here because I want to be fair to both of us, and because I think this is one of the things that most couples heading into retirement are not having honest conversations about. The dynamic shifts. When you've been gone, really gone, traveling, working, the kind of unavailable that isn't rude but is structural, and then you're suddenly home all the time, present in the house in a way you haven't been for the majority of the marriage, that's an adjustment for both people, not a crisis, an adjustment. And if you don't name it while it's happening, it can do damage you didn't intend. Here's what happened specifically. I came home, I retired, I stopped traveling, and I brought with me, without realizing I was doing it, everything I'd spent 30 years refining. I'm a person who sees problems and solves them. I see a process that could run better and I say so. It's not arrogance exactly, it's just that's the operating mode. That's what I'd been paid essentially to do for 3 decades. And so I started doing it in the house. I noticed things. I suggested improvements. I made recommendations about how certain things could be structured more efficiently. I was, in my own assessment, being helpful. Barbara, in the warmest possible way, told me to stop. She didn't say it with any heat. She's not that kind of person. She runs cold in the best sense, clear and precise. She said, "This has been running fine for a long time without you here. It doesn't need to be fixed, and it doesn't need you to be the one running it." I wanted to say something back. I had a response forming, and I heard it forming, and I recognized it for what it was. The defensive reflex of a man who doesn't like being told he's not needed. And I let it go, because she was right. She was completely and entirely right. What I had done was walk into a system that had been functioning with competence and care for decades while I was elsewhere, and I had immediately started treating it like a turnaround situation. The home that Barbara had been managing, the rhythm she'd established, the relationships she'd maintained, the life she'd kept together while I was on a plane somewhere being useful to other people. I had walked in and started optimizing it, without asking, without noticing what was already working. The adjustment was real and it took time. It required, and I use this word because it's the right one, humility. Not the humility of a deal that didn't work, which is a humility I know well and have practiced out of necessity. The humility of recognizing that the space you're entering has its own wisdom that predates your arrival, and that the person who built that space deserves something other than your suggestions. That was harder. That was a different kind of lesson than any I'd had before. I'll tell you where we are now. The marriage is the best it's been. I mean that. Not because we fixed something, but because I'm actually here. Not physically present in the building. Here. There's a difference. It took me an embarrassingly long time to learn the difference, but I know it now. The fourth thing is about money, and I'll say clearly, this isn't investment talk. I don't do that. I'm not your financial advisor. I'm not anyone's financial advisor. I'm a man who made a lot of decisions, some of them good and some of them expensive, and lived long enough to tell them apart. This is something else. For most of my adult life, and I think this is true for a lot of people who worked the way I worked, who built the way I built, I carried a belief that was so deep I never really examined it. The belief was this, that financial security would solve the hard things, not everything. I wasn't naive enough to think money solved everything, but the things that really kept you up, the worry, the background noise that runs under everything when you're not sure whether you're going to be okay, that I believe money would quiet. And it did, some of it. I want to be honest about that too, because I'm not one of those people who's going to sit here comfortable and tell you money doesn't matter. It matters. Being broke at 31 and comfortable at 68 are genuinely different experiences, and the difference is not small. Some fears I had at 31, I don't have now. That's real. I'm grateful for it. I don't take it lightly. But here's what moved in. Here's what I didn't see coming. Different worry. Better quality worry, maybe. I used to say that and think it was funny, and I still think it's accurate, but it's less funny the longer I sit with it. The questions that money couldn't touch. The question of whether I was present enough for the people who mattered when it still would have meant something to them. Whether the decisions I made, deal over dinner, flight over recital, deal again over something I can't even remember now, whether those were worth the trade. I can't go back and audit that. The accounting is closed. The question of what my kids actually think I stood for, not what I think I stood for. I have a clear answer for that. What Daniel thinks, what Rachel thinks. Those might be different answers. I don't fully know. And at 68, with both of them adults with their own lives and their own memories of who their father was and when he was and wasn't there, those questions are real. And money doesn't answer them, not even close. I'm not saying this to be bleak. I'm saying it because I think there's an entire half of retirement that the financial planning conversation completely misses. You plan the numbers. You work with advisors. You set up the structure. And all of that matters. But you walk into retirement thinking you've secured the future, and what you find is that the future has a set of questions in it that have nothing to do with the account balance. And if nobody warned you that those questions were coming, and nobody warned me, then you're standing there unprepared for something you could have at least started thinking about earlier. That's the part I wish someone had said plainly. I'm trying to say it plainly now. The fifth thing is the one I think about most often, and it comes from my father, which means it's been in my life a long time. I just didn't fully understand it until I needed to. My father's name was Elliot. He came here with nothing, and I mean that without any romanticization or exaggeration. He had nothing when he arrived. He didn't talk about that period much. He didn't need to. You could see it in how he treated things, how he handled a dollar, how he approached a meal, how he shook hands. Everything had the quality of someone who knew what it cost to have it because he had been without it and had built toward it with his own hands. He built a modest life, nothing like what I eventually built, different scale entirely, but solid, his. Dignified in the way that things are dignified when they're genuinely yours and you didn't cut corners to get there. And he used to say, I heard this on Friday nights, sitting at the table, candles lit, regularly enough that it became furniture in my childhood. He used to say, a man who doesn't know what he's building is a man who's just busy. I took that sentence and I used it for 30 years. I used it as fuel, as orientation. Know what you're building. Work toward it. Don't confuse motion with progress. It was good advice. It served me well. But here's what I understand now, sitting on the other side of that advice, that I didn't understand when I was using it. He wasn't only talking about the business. He wasn't talking about deals or revenue or structure. He was talking about the whole life. He was saying, and I think he knew this in the way that men of his generation knew things, which is in the bones rather than in the language. He was saying that at every stage, at every age, in every chapter, you have to know what you're building. Because if you don't know, you're just moving. And movement isn't the same thing as construction. I retired thinking I had arrived somewhere, that the construction was complete, that I had built the thing and now I got to live in it. And what I found instead is that the lot gets cleared. The old structure comes down, the function goes away, the urgency disappears. And now there's this open ground, and it's yours. And nobody is going to hand you the blueprint for what comes next. Nobody ever hands you the blueprint. You have to decide, what am I building now? What goes on this ground? What does the next version of this life actually look like? From the inside, for the people I love, in the time I have left? Those are not easy questions. They're not questions you answer once in a hallway and move on. They're questions you live inside of. and the willingness to stay in the question, to not pretend you've answered it before you have, I think that's the thing that determines whether retirement becomes something real or just a long drift. The one thing I wish I knew before I retired, the actual one thing, is that the construction doesn't end. It changes. The materials change. The site changes. The scale might change. What you're building toward, that will surprise you if you let it. But the work continues, and the people who think they're done building when they leave the job, they're the ones I worry about, because done building usually means done growing, and I'm not ready for that. I hope I'm not ready for that for a long time. I'm still in the question. I want you to know that. I'm not coming to you from the other side of a solved problem. I'm coming from inside it, a few steps further in than some of you, trying to tell you honestly what I've found so far. I'm not going to wrap this up and make it sound cleaner than it is. That's not the deal here. Some mornings, more now than a year ago, I'll say that, I sit outside with coffee, Florida light coming in slow, nothing scheduled, nothing urgent, and it feels right, like the thing I worked toward actually arrived and I'm standing in it. Those mornings are real. Other mornings I wake up and the day has no shape to it, and I have to make the shape myself, which I can do now, but which still takes effort in a way I didn't expect. Some mornings I catch myself reaching for the phone, for the problem, for the thing that needs deciding, and there isn't one. And I have to remind myself that this is the work now, learning how to be here, choosing to be here. That's the job. Barbara said something to me a few weeks ago. We were in the car, coming back from Rachel's, from seeing Eli and Maya, and she said it the way she says the things that stick, which is quietly and without any build-up. She said, "You spent 30 years building something to leave. Maybe now figure out what you're building to stay." I didn't have an answer. I told her that. She said, "I know. That's why I said it. I'm working on the answer." That's the most honest thing I can tell you. If any of this landed for you, leave a comment. And I mean something specific, not great video. Tell me, what's the one thing about retirement that you didn't see coming? Or, if you're not there yet, what's the question that keeps you up at night when you think about it? I read those. Barbara says I spend too much time in the comments section. She's probably right. She usually is. But those specific answers, the real ones, the ones people write when they stop performing, those I find more useful than almost anything else. They tell me what to talk about next. If you want more of this, honest conversation, no system, no 5 steps, just what it actually looks like from where I'm standing, stick around. That's what we do here. All right, take care of yourselves.